In this video, we're going to look at the management of RDS instances. Let us see how to manage the RDS instances. Okay. One of the regular activities we may want to do with RDS is stopping the instance. Sometimes we need to stop the instance if it's not being used, just so we can save some money on the bill. Or there could be other issues or other scenarios where you want to stop the instance. This is the CLI command you can use to stop the instance. Now, if you use AWS RDS stop DB instance followed by instance identifier, it will stop the instance. You can stop the instance using this command. Or another way you could do it is by stopping the instance via the console. One important thing to remember is, although you stop the instance, after 7 days, RDS is automatically started back. Let's say you want to stop the instance for 1 month. Although your retention is to stop for 1 month, AWS automatically starts it after 7 days. You need to remember that, okay? While your DB instance is stopped, you are charged for provision IOPS and backup storage, but not for the instance servers. This is one thing you need to remember as well. You may think that I stopped the instance and I won't be billed for anything that's related to that instance. It will still be billed for any provision IOPS. Let's say you added 5,000 PIOPS, provision IOPS, to that instance. You will still be charged for that, but you will not be charged for the actual instance hours. Also, you will be charged for backup storage as well. Remember that, okay? Another thing that may worry you is, oh, I stopped my instance and when I started it back, do I lose its properties? No, it retains the instance ID, DNS endpoint, parameter group, security group. It retains everything. So when you start the instance again, it has the same configuration you stopped it with. That's a good thing, right? You don't lose any of the configuration you had before stopping it. Good information. One thing to note is, if you stop a DB instance that has a read replica, or that is one, it is not allowed. So stopping a read replica or an instance with read replicas is not allowed. You can delete a DB parameter group that is directly associated with a stop DB instance. Let's say there is a stop DB instance and there is an associated parameter group. Although the instance is stopped, it may still need that parameter group in the future when it's started back. For that reason, you're not allowed to delete that parameter group. We have seen how to actually stop the instance. All right? What are some of the important things to note regarding stopping the instance? The next thing is rebooting the instance. How do we reboot? We can reboot an instance with this command, AWS RDS reboot DB instance. DB instance identifier, and actual instance identifier, whatever it is. There is also an option called force failover. Let's say you have a multi-AZ deployment and you want to force failover during the reboot. You can do that. These are two commands that you can use to reboot. We have seen stop and reboot. Let's go to the console and see how we do that via the console. In the console, this is the DB instance, and go to actions, and there is stop. There is reboot as well. You can see stop and reboot from the console as well. Let me do a stop. Okay? So it's just asking, are you sure you want to stop the instance? And then it's also asking whether to create a snapshot. I am saying no. I don't want a snapshot. And it's warning that you can stop only up to 7 days. This is one thing we discussed earlier. After 7 days, it's going to start the instance automatically back again. If you don't do this manually, it will start your DB instance after 7 days automatically. That's the one thing you need to remember. Let me go ahead and stop it, okay? Refresh here. All right. Let's see. What do we have? It's saying stopping. You can also check in the events. After some time, it should reflect once the stop is done. Still in the stop. Let's give it a minute or two because it may take some time to stop the actual instance. So let's check this status now. The status is now stopped. You can also check the events to see if the event is updated. Okay? It says the instance is stopped. One thing to remember is with multi-AZ deployments, the stop can take a long time, so you need to remember that when you're stopping an instance. Sometimes it may take longer than you think. Now that the instance is stopped, let us try to start it back. Here I'm trying to use the AWS CLI. All right, let's get where I need here. I will use AWS RDS start DB instance and then the DB instance identifier database -1. Let's try this. It's asking for a region. Okay. Here we go. Okay. We gave the start. Let's go to the console and refresh. Now the status is starting. That's how you can also use CLI, not just the console. You can use CLI to start or stop the instance. If you want to stop an instance, all you have to do is you have to give AWS RDS stop DB instance like this. You can also use AWS CLI to do these operations, not just the console. Let's go back and wait for this to be started back, okay? Sometimes it's going to take a few minutes to start back. You just need to give it some time to start back. And also you can keep checking the events to see if the start is complete. Currently, the start is not complete, but it will take a few more minutes in order for that to finish. That's how you can actually start and stop an instance. The other thing people generally do is they're rebooting the instance. So you can also reboot the instances in this option. Currently, it's not enabled because the instance is in the starting state, but normally you can actually use the reboot. Also, if you want to reboot an instance, under reboot, there are two options: reboot with failover or without failover. Also, for multi-AZ, sometimes you want to reboot with the failover. Beneficial. Let's go back to the slides. We saw stopping, starting, and rebooting. We can actually reboot an instance with forced failover. These are some of the options. Let's take a look at the other slide. I know this is a lot of information, so make sure you go back and recap and go over the different techniques and how to do it so you can pause the videos and go through it yourself, okay? We saw details about stopping an instance and also starting and rebooting, right? Let's move on. Let's move to modifying an instance. A lot of times you need to modify an instance to change a configuration. You can do that using AWS RDS modify DB instance CLI command. And these are the options you would give DB instance identifier, then the instance name. Here we're changing the backup retention period to 7 days. Also, you will be changing the deletion protection And then there are two options, apply immediately or no apply immediately. Here in this case, we're doing no apply immediately, which means the configuration change is not applied immediately. Rather, it is deferred for the next maintenance window. But if you say apply immediately, things will be applied immediately, and sometimes it can cause an outage. So you have to be careful with these particular options, okay? We can also do the same thing with the console. I'm going to show you how to do it with the console as well. Let us see the next scenario. Okay, the next scenario, let's say you want to enable performance insights for monitoring. You could do this via the command line. AWS RDS modify DB instance again, and then the instance identifier, enable performance insights apply immediately region. Okay? Basically, you can enable performance insights like with this. This is a simple command, or you can also use the console for the same thing. This is another scenario where you will use the modify instance method. The third scenario is, let's say automatic backups are disabled, and you want to enable automatic backups. You can do this using this command, AWS RDS modify DB instance identifier, and then the name, and then enable performance insights. This is the wrong command. Sorry about that. We got to use a different command. But in this case, you'll be given the backup retention period and then apply immediately. You can also use modify instance to enable automatic backups. Okay? So the exact command will be given in the sections of the video later, but here I have a typo. We can also do the same thing using the console. Some of the gotchas using modify instance. Some modifications result in outages because RDS must reboot your instance for the change. Make sure that you review the impact of the change before you modify the instance. Let's say you apply immediately without knowing the impact of the change. It's going to cause an outage if you're using that RDS in production. So you have to be careful with what kind of change you're doing and the options you're giving, okay? Most modifications to a DB instance, you can either apply immediately or defer into the next maintenance window. Good information. Basically, depending on the criticality of the application, sometimes the test instance you have can basically apply immediately. But if it's production, you want to refer to the next maintenance window. Some modifications, such as parameter group changes, require that you manually reboot the instance for the change to take effect. In the parameter group changes for MySQL, there are static and dynamic parameters. For dynamic parameters, they're applied immediately, but static parameters, basically, you need to reboot your database instance. You need to remember that, okay? Never forget that. Now that we have looked at various scenarios of modifying instances, let us move to RDS maintenance. Maintenance is very important. It's a very important part for RDS. What type of maintenance? Maintenance mostly involves updates to an instance, underlying hardware, underlying operating system, or database engine version. There can be different kinds of maintenance activities that AWS applies on a regular basis, and it has to do with underlying hardware or OS or database version. Updates to the operating system most often occur for security issues and should be done as soon as possible. There are regular security patches and they need to be done as soon as possible. Some maintenance activities require that RDS will be offline for a short time. All right. Also, one important thing is people sometimes think, oh no, I don't want to do maintenance. I want to defer it because we are in peak season. I don't want my RDS instance to be impacted. The thing is, some maintenance activities can be deferred, and some are required and cannot be deferred. The patches that are related to security or instance reliability, those are required changes and cannot be deferred. So, how does maintenance look in the console? All right. So there is a maintenance tab in the console. And for that particular instance, the second one, it says next window. This means that there's a maintenance that's going to happen the next maintenance window. You can go ahead and check the details about it if you want. If you have any doubts, of course, you can also contact AWS support regarding that upcoming maintenance, and sometimes that's possible to defer that. Like I discussed before, there are several types of maintenance. Though some are required, which means that the maintenance action will be applied to the resource and cannot be deferred. And some are in the available mode, which means basically you can apply it manually. And the next window, which means that you expect the changes to happen in the next maintenance window. So, that's something to remember, okay? And in progress means that there's a maintenance action going on that particular instance. And it's in progress. These are some of the things you need to know about RDS maintenance. All right, take note. Remember, default maintenance window. Let's say you created a RDS instance and you did not designate a maintenance window. What happens then? There's a default maintenance window, like every Tuesday on a particular time, or every Wednesday on a particular time, depending on the region. Other factors here, there's a default maintenance window that is allocated, and you can actually change that depending on the need. These are some of the regions and the time block that is by default allocated. You can actually configure according to your needs. So how do you change a maintenance window? You can use AWS CLI command. AWS RDS modify DB instance identifier preferred maintenance window. I want Tuesday 4 a.m. to 4:30. You can change this, or you can also change it via the console. And let's say there's a pending maintenance, and you want to apply manually. You can do that using this command. AWS RDS apply pending maintenance action, and then apply action opt-in type immediate. Sometimes what happens is if you don't want to wait for the next maintenance window and you have a time slot that's available where the database is not being used and you want to apply manually before it does occur automatically, you can just do this as well. And you can do that using this method, and you can also do it via the console. Also, you want to list the pending maintenance actions. Let's say every so often you want to check. Let's say you are managing 30 to 40 RDS instances. You cannot go back and check all the instances via the console, like all 30 to 40 instances, to see if there is an upcoming maintenance. Instead, you can use a command like this, just to see if there's a pending maintenance action in this command, and then take action accordingly. We have seen some commands, and we will use these commands in the next lesson. We will also use the console to make these changes. Okay? See you next video.